are going to invite up Eulois Cleckley from the Underline, who is going to introduce our final speaker of the day. Eulois.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Good afternoon. Oh my goodness. So we have an option here. We can make this the most boring next 45 minutes of your life, or we can get some excitement in here. So good afternoon. All right, very good. So I'm Eulois Cleckley. I'm the CEO of Friends of the Underline, and appreciate the opportunity to moderate this great panel that we have coming up here. I do want to take a personal privilege, one, to say thank you to all of you who took time out to vote for the Underline. And those of you who are in the South Florida region, the next time that you're in Miami, make sure that you go and visit the Underline. We have some fantastic things going on. We will be fully complete by 2026. So if you want to hear more about the Underline, go to theunderline.org, theunderline.org. Shameless plug. So thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. So also I want to give a shout out to Veronica Davis. Is Veronica here? Okay. Did you guys enjoy her speech? And I just want to say, publicly thank her. Veronica and I go back too long to count, and we started off actually going through the US DOT in a professional development program, and I'm very proud of her over the past 2 decades of what she's done. And so I'm glad that she got a chance to speak with each and every one of you, and hopefully you learned something from her. So with that being said, we have our final session of today, which will focus on emerging transportation technologies, which is extremely important in terms of how those technologies are revolutionizing how we approach safety, efficiency, and mobility for all. And so you will learn from some great speakers today. And I will call their names. They will come up, give a brief presentation, and then we will open it up for Q&A. And so the first speaker I'd like to call up is another good friend of mine, Miss Karina. There's this DC love that we have. We all came, either worked with DDOT or worked with the US DOT. And so Karina actually hired me back in the day. So it was great to see Karina again. So Karina is a partner at Cityfi, and she is an urban planner, innovator, and transportation expert focused on creating equitable, sustainable, and people-centered places. She has served as the associate administrator at FTA, transportation director in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and in Washington, D.C. As well, and now a partner at Cityfi. She has led multiple efforts that modernize transportation, enhance public transit, prioritize pedestrian and cyclist safety, and expand economic opportunities. So great to see you, Karina. Next, we have Philippe Crist. Philippe is a recognized international expert on mobility and innovation policies. At the core of his work is a conviction that policies must serve people, and that technology only helps when it helps all, not just a few. Technology cannot be about only the how, but the what for. And he is an author of numerous international reports on mobility and technology, and does much of his best thinking on a bicycle. I don't know if that's dangerous or not, but I'm glad to have you here as well. So just as another housekeeping rule, keep in mind that use Slido to submit your questions, and look forward to a very engaging presentation from Philip and Karina, and then also we'll get into the Q&A moving forward. So with that being said, Karina, I'll call you up.
Okay. All right, fantastic. So Mitch had to get you going after coffee. Veronica had to wake you up after lunch, and we're supposed to keep you engaged when you know happy hour is just around the corner, so that's going to be exciting. I'm Karina Rex, I'm a partner at Cityfi. So we have talked so far a lot about the physical world and the physical streets, context, transportation systems, and those. We're going to take this time to kind of cast ourselves into the future a little bit as to what is around the corner and what is going to happen in the way of innovative mobility. What do we need to plan for? A lot of that is going to be digital. Does this advance? Green button, got it, thank you. So digital technologies are really enabling innovative solutions with new operating systems, new form factors, and new options for moving people, goods, services, and ideas. And the digital revolution brings a lot of shiny new objects that are very seducing. They're dazzling, they're shiny. They're things that we just want to grab at and be the first to really bring these forward to our communities. They're exciting, and they'll be disruptive, both for good and for bad. And so it's really important that we understand what is coming at us, what is the opportunity that it presents, and why do we want to really think about some of these new technologies. They can certainly do things better, safer, faster, and more joyfully, but only really if guided and deployed with deliberate purpose. Some of the things that were coming at us, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, it really allows us to combine and crunch massive data sets and inputs in a nanosecond to really move very swiftly to understand things in new dimensions than we have before. It allows real-time dynamic management of right-of-way and operations rather than fixed and static allocations. And so really allows us to think not just in 3 dimensions, but in this 4th dimension of time. And how are we going to do things there? Digital infrastructure and digital twins allow us really it's not even a 360-degree view. We can now see our environments not only in the visual, horizontal, and vertical, but also what's beneath us, what's above us, what's behind us. I don't even know how the new sensors in some of the new cars work when it's like looking down on you, and I'm wondering, like, is it God that is like coming into my car to show me where everything is? But now we really have all of this visibility. It allows us to communicate policies and operational rules through a digital sphere so that we can communicate to those connected vehicles so that we can, again, change policies in real time and convey those out to the world to try and get those desired outcomes and really prioritize according to the policies that we have. We are looking increasingly at autonomous and aerial mobility systems, and I know that this has been, I'll talk a little bit later, I moved to Pittsburgh in 2017, and I told my kids as we moved there, who were 11 and 12 at the time, I'm sorry, you're never gonna get a driver's license because we're here for the new mobility revolution. By 2020, everything's gonna be autonomous and robots will be driving you. They now both have driver's licenses, and I'm terrified to share the road with them. But in any event, advanced air mobility or unmanned aerial systems really take us literally to a new dimension of mobility. Up above, they can allow direct line of travel literally as the crow flies. They can shrink perceived distances, shrinking time and adding resilience, which we've unfortunately seen the dramatic need for in things like the climate events that happened in North Carolina last year. Autonomous mobility still promises to provide safer travel than distracted humans with multiple digital devices. But again, we really need to think about what are those outcomes that we want. And then we're seeing new kinds of form factors that are evolving. Technology has allowed now things that we really haven't pictured before. E-cargo delivery truck trikes, quad cycles, e-tuk-tuks, low-speed vehicles like what's out in front of this hotel, neighborhood electric vehicles. Collectively, they're referred to as LUV, light urban vehicles, which is the term I prefer, because who wouldn't? Or the more pedestrian propelled light mobility, which is used in Europe. These are smaller, lighter, more affordable, and travel at safer speeds than conventional travel, but they really provide the opportunity to right-size travel devices for those 50% of trips that we have that are less than 5 miles in distance. So you don't need to have massive SUV to move, a parent, 2 kids, and 2 bags of groceries a few thousand feet. So these are things that provide that opportunity. And they're all really exciting. They're all technologies that we hope that we'll see soon. But these notions might be sexy but soulless if they're not grounded in human-centered outcomes and a clear-eyed, purpose-driven understanding of the future that we're trying to reach. So we really have to ask ourselves when these technologies, when we're just seduced by these new innovations that are coming, what are you solving for? Why do they need to be in your community? What is the outcome that you want at the end of the day? And the outcomes that we want are what we've always wanted, right? We want mobility that's affordable. Transportation for many, 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 many households in the United States surpasses housing as an expense. And that continues to rise even as housing costs rise. So affordability and mobility is something that we want to solve for everyone. We want to solve for access. That's the point of transportation, is really to get you to those essential destinations of daily life. We want reliability. We want to know that it's going to take 20 minutes consistently for me to get where I'm going. I can plan my day and don't have to be subject to whatever variability might come. And we want safety, enjoyability, comfort, and joy, like what Mitch was saying. This is what we want, and transportation plays a really important role in that. So we need to link those innovations to the outcomes, and it's really going to take purpose and leadership and partnerships to develop clear and consistent policies that can promote transparency and in decision-making and build trust as you're bringing in things that really have not been seen before, that are something different in the community. So these 4 components are something that I think is really essential for these solutions to be successful when you're bringing in some of these new mobility innovations. And I'll talk a little bit about how this is playing out just through some quick examples, and we'll get into the discussion. But why, again, the theme of this conference is partnership and leadership, and why it takes working together. So one example is one that's going on right now. How many of you know that the US, North America, is hosting the World Cup in about 18 months? Right, so South Florida, you saw Copa America, you're gonna see this again. This is great, right? And this is like hosting a Super Bowl 6 times, sometimes 9 times, depending if you've got the championship rounds, in 1 month in your city. So this is a really intense time. It's something that all of those transportation challenges that you have in your day-to-day life are now going to be exacerbated with the hundreds of thousands of fans and others, the ticket holders and non-ticket holders who will be coming to these regions. And so one collaboration that we're helping to facilitate is bringing together the 11 American host cities, host regions, both the transit agencies and their transportation agencies, to work together across these very, very different places. Let me tell you, Dallas, or rather Arlington, Texas, is not the same as Seattle. So they have very different notions of this. I'm running out of time, so we'll go quickly. But they've come together, and they are working then to craft some problems, invite innovation, but invite problem-oriented innovations to come to them to really pitch and bring those notions. The same thing is happening through a Curb Collaborative, where we've got 10 different cities that have come together, inviting innovation, inviting digital transformation to solve real curb problems that these cities have designed. So working with delivery operators, with community businesses, with logistics providers, and looking at how can technology integrate with those systems that exist. My work in Pittsburgh with autonomous vehicles was really bringing the industry in to co-design problems together with the stakeholders. So we have the Pittsburgh principles that outline 10 things that we want to see as a community that this technology needs to integrate with and advance. And then finally, speaking of love, we should make more love, looking at these light urban vehicles that really don't fit into conventional motor vehicle codes. They're larger than a bike, smaller than a car. Do they go in a bike lane? Do they go in a general purpose lane? Do they need to be licensed? How do you insure them? What is happening rather than having policies that are derived by industry and then shopped around for adoption, or derived by states with the intent purpose of preempting cities, really bringing together a coalition that is industry, cities, and states to co-design policies and regulations for predictability that are really outcome-focused, so we can look at these designs, bring them to scale in a predictable regulatory environment. But it takes that partnership, it takes that leadership to really invite these innovations in a singular way. So I will leave it at that. Okay.
Thanks, Karina. Thank you all for staying for this final session today. Thank you also for the Palm Beach TPA for having all these great speakers. I've learned a lot. I hope you've learned a lot. And I hope that you will also take away a bit from both of our presentations and the discussions we're about to have. And those discussions are going to center on what we've just been talking about, all of these innovative mobility solutions that are in our cities, these things that come with technologies, but they also bundle technologies with services. I work around the world with cities, with governments who are facing all of these. And Karina, you went through exactly the list of options and even more options that local authorities and national authorities are trying to get their mind around. And a lot of those discussions, almost all of those discussions go to the technology first. They go to the automated vehicle. They go to the new micromobility service that's available on their streets. They go to artificial intelligence and how is that going to work. And I think it's not really helpful to focus on those things when you're a city. What's most helpful to focus on is what is going to be your stance. What is going to be the way in which you're going to react, adapt to, guide, in some cases, test these new services, these technologies. And in many ways, focusing on the technology itself isn't really the most fundamental thing at hand. It's really how to answer this question: what is it that we think about when we think about fill in whatever new innovative mobility solution, fill in whatever technology it is that you're having to address? And I'm going to do that by looking at four things. A little bit of discussion. I'm going to end up exactly where Karina ended up, house rules. But the four things I'm going to talk about are what it is to be human, because this is something that ultimately these services should help us become more human, better, focusing on the people that are in our constituencies. Talk a bit about opportunity, talk about efficiency, because a lot of these services come with a promise of efficiency, and also to talk a bit about infrastructure, but not the kind of infrastructure that we've mostly been talking about today, even though that's really important. So let's talk about what it is to be human. Now, there's all kinds of ways of trying to break this down. I'll focus on four main things, and this is from what I've seen around the world when different types of local authorities, different communities come together and talk about what it is that they are trying to preserve, what it is that they want to enable cities, governments, technologies to deliver. And the first is that humans are active. We heard about it this morning. We've heard about it today. We are physiologically built for movement. We are designed, our sinews, our muscles, our brains are all designed to be hot-wired by the movement that we do every day. When we move, we become healthier, we become happier. When we don't move, we become sadder and we become sicker. And so that's one fundamental aspect of being human, and that is something that we have to keep in mind. We are frictious. Now, this requires a little more description of what it is that this entails. And at the heart of this is the fact that humans, that we don't become better by avoiding things that are easy, by moving away from what is difficult. We become better, we grow by overcoming those things. And that's true physically, but it's also true mentally. There's this great adage from Roman times that not everything that is good is easy, and not everything that is easy is good. And this is something to keep in mind, because when we think about technology and these services creating and delivering a life of limitless ease, that's not necessarily what's going to help us build up into better people. And that's not necessarily what is going to contribute to our communities being better for the people that live there, up to a certain point. We are free. We have this impetus for self-determination, for agency, for autonomy, something that we should have from childhood all the way through to the end of our years. And it is fundamentally what we strive for in society. It's what we strive for in government. It's what we strive for individually. But our freedom, as important as it is, ends where the freedom of others starts, because we are also these social beings. We live in society, and everything that we have been able to do, everything that individually we've been able to do, everything that we have been able to do collectively has been because of others, not despite others. By building on this socializing aspect, that is something to keep in the back of the minds when we think about whatever that innovative mobility solution is. So the question is, when we're faced with this new solution, ask ourselves, is it pro-human in the sense that I described? Is it going to help make us or help retain our level of activity? Is it going to improve or at least not erode that important aspect of socialization in our communities? Does it empower us to be more free? Does it, in other ways, take away freedoms from us? These are all really, really important questions. And when these relate to technologies, there's a sub-question that's quite important as well, and that is that technology convivial? Does that technology work with us, or does that technology work for us or replaces us? Now, I'm not going to say one is better than the other, but it's important to keep that in mind when we're evaluating new technologies and new services built on these technologies. A bit about opportunity, and when we think about cities, generally, we know that cities concentrate opportunity. And in order to live a fulfilled life, we have to have access to those opportunities. And you've heard time and time again in different ways that mobility, physical movement, is part of how we access opportunity. It's not the only way. The OG reason for having cities is because it brings things closer together. So proximity is also a way in which we deliver opportunity. And that opportunity can be jobs, it can be meeting people, it can be the opportunity to develop new ideas, the opportunity to innovate, the opportunity to be educated, the opportunity to consume as well. And there's also, of course, digital connectivity that is part of that. When we to quickly advance through here, when we think about these three poles of access, proximity, movement, digital connectivity, at least between proximity and movement, there are some trade-offs that we should evaluate when we think about evaluating these new mobility services. And those questions, again, are going to be, does this innovative mobility solution improve access to opportunity? For whom does it improve that access? Under what conditions? And at what price? Efficiency is, of course, something that we hope to get from many of these new mobility services. But there is, again, an important question to ask, and that is the efficiency of what? I'll give a few examples of how that can play out in our day-to-day life when we think about, as authorities, welcoming or managing or other ways accommodating these new mobility services. And the first thing is to think about what we're trying to optimize for. Now, in transport and traffic management, the first thing we're trying to optimize for, at least for the past 50 years, is delivering time savings for individuals. And that's because time is the scarcest resource that individuals have. So when we create new infrastructure, we hope that it delivers time savings. But what is rare for cities in many places is space. And so we have this different optimization problem. We have to think about how do we optimize the use of that space, the allocation of that space, and to what purposes. Another, I'm going to quickly advance through this, because this is not the presentation that I saved, but when we think about automated driving, what is the question, or what is the answer, rather, that, or what is rather the question that automated driving is the answer to? And if you ask many people in this field, they'll say, well, the question is, how do we make road traffic safer? And there are a lot of ways to make road traffic safer. We can think of, we've heard of many of them today already. The question to ask ourselves when we think about efficiency of creating safer spaces is, are these automated vehicles, self-driving vehicles, the first best answer? Are they going to be the top 5, the top 10, or only in the top 50 best answers to how do we make our city streets safer? And spoiler alert, they're not the best way. They're probably in the top 10 to top 20 ways. But the important thing there is we have to consider why, in what way would we as an authority deal with a new technology that isn't going to be as efficient to deliver the outcomes we want as many of the, not old technologies, but the ways in which we already know how to address this problem. When we think about efficiency, does that innovative mobility solution improve efficiency, and more particularly, of what, for whom, and is it as efficient as other solutions? My screen has gone completely blank now, so I'm going to turn to here. The last bit I want to talk about is infrastructure, and I'm going to go back a bit. And I'll talk about infrastructure in a slightly different way. So we have, when we think about mobility, when we think about transportation in cities, there's this stack of different kinds of infrastructure. The base is the built environment. So this is the buildings, these are the activities, and these are highly regulated in most cities around the world. Then there's, of course, the transportation network that allows these different types of origins, destinations, and buildings to be connected. And on top of that, there are all of these infrastructure-based services. These are going to be public transportation, they're going to be taxis, they're even you and I cycling, walking, or driving our cars. But now, as we heard from Karina, there's this new type of infrastructure that's digital infrastructure and data infrastructure that is increasingly important in order to access many of these new mobility services. But unlike those other layers of the infrastructure stack, this is hardly regulated at all. And even though it is foundational infrastructure in that you have to more and more interact with this type of infrastructure to live a fulfilled life. Now, for more than 2,000 years, we've built up a model for how do we govern public space. But what we can see now, the real challenge is how to interject some of that thinking about what we want out of the public realm into digital public spaces. And similarly, when we assess this new innovative mobility solution, questions we have to ask ourselves about how does it impact public space, and that includes digital public spaces. Does it enclose those spaces, or does it free it up? Does it allow us to have more access to opportunity because of the access to that type of infrastructure? In what way can it be integrated into the models that we have for managing and for governing public space? So a different take on infrastructure, but one that is increasingly important, especially when we consider digitalization and now the arrival, the infusion of AI everywhere. I'll finish by saying a few things about house rules. Now, I grew up in a house, this is my mother, by the way, in a house who she set rules as to what we can do and can't do in our house. And that wasn't just for us, it was for our guests, it was for generally anyone who came into our house. And what I'd like to point out is that cities similarly have both a responsibility and the possibility of establishing their house rules. And this is exactly, Karina, what you were saying. And having that set of house rules has to build on a vision. And once you have those house rules in place, then you are better positioned to assess any new mobility service, any innovative mobility solution, any technology. But if you don't have those guide points, if you don't have those core values identified, then it makes it a lot more difficult, and you're engaging in this long-term whack-a-mole game. And those house rules, when it comes to these innovative mobility solutions, aren't going to be about technology. They're going to be about what we want for people, what we want for the cities and places that we live in. So when we look at what kinds of house rules are in place around the world, what we can see among the most effective of those are these 4 types of outcomes: review, realign, regulate, respace. Does this innovation what is the vision behind this innovation? What impact does this innovative mobility service or solution have on attaining that vision? And that is the first assessment as to whether or not or how we want to welcome or otherwise accompany this new service. When we think about these new innovative mobility solutions, does that change the way in which we think about delivering on the vision? Does it change our vision? And that's something that increasingly we'll see, because these are fairly significant new types of opportunities that are availing themselves to us. When we think again about these, is our regulation effective for these new types of mobility services and the outcomes that we want? Is it proportionate? Are we over-regulating? Are we under-regulating? Are we facing these regulatory asymmetries? And finally, when it comes to this impact on space, is our allocation and governance of public space aligned with our vision when it comes to the impact, the probable impact, or the experienced impact of these new mobility solutions? These four things, review, realign, regulate, respace, is what we see the most successful communities around the world when it comes to trying to find a way to ensure that these new innovative mobility solutions are contributing to the outcomes that they want, that their citizens want, and that will help them deliver that in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those wonderful presentations from Karina and Philippe. So we do have a couple of questions from the crowd. And so this question is for both of you. So are there any key lessons learned that you can share when trying to introduce new technologies?
So a few of the things are know why you're introducing them. I think that's sort of the foundational point for both of us. It's so easy to just want to be first, to want to be the one that is bringing this new thing that you read about that Europe has or some other place. But it's not about being first. It's about being firm in your sort of beliefs and the outcomes and the policies and the vision and goals that you have. So I would say that's first of all, is be very clear-eyed and be willing to be able to articulate how you're drawing that connection between what this new technology is and what the outcomes are that you want to seek. I would say second, understand that it's a co-design process, that both co-designing with your community members, but also co-designing with the technologists. So what their marketing and what their salespeople have approached you with is not necessarily what you need to accept, right? They can customize it, they can tailor it. You do not need solutions in search of problems. You have problems that need solutions. Be very clear about the problems and demand that those be tailored to what you need. I would say have clear evaluations. How are you going to know if it's working? How is this making a difference? And have an exit strategy, have an off-ramp. Too often we pilot things or adopt new innovations and we're like, we don't know how to get off this train. If it's not working, make sure that you have an off-ramp to that so that you can, and again, be very, very transparent and have predictable decision-making when you're introducing these things.
And I would add, I mean, we've heard a lot about the importance of planning. I would say that one important thing to keep in mind is integrate these kinds of questions into your urban planning process, into the plans that you actually create. A good example is the city of Brussels put out what in Europe is an obligation for large cities, their sustainable urban mobility plan. That plan is called Good Move. And one element of that Good Move plan is the impact of digitalization on the delivery of that plan. And in that, they have a number of specific categories of, or processes rather, on how they will evaluate new mobility services and new technologies that arrive in the capital region. It's not just the city, it's the capital region. And they use that to evaluate, and more importantly, they use that to open up a conversation with the people, with the companies that are coming with an idea. And the feedback they heard, and the feedback we've also heard here, is that these companies prefer having some certainty, predictability, in the environment in which they're going to operate, and having the city as a partner in developing what that predictability looks like is really important. But hard decisions have to be made. And there are cities, Paris is one, Amsterdam is another, that have made hard decisions to exclude certain types of new mobility services because A, they had a plan, B, they had a commitment to that plan, they had a clear articulation of their values. And when they could not find a way, they said, well, this is not right for us at this time. Importantly, they had the authority to do that. So that's also really important.
Great, and there's a follow-up question I actually have because you mentioned pilots, right? A lot of times I think folks have a difficulty in understanding how do you assess the effectiveness of a pilot, and then what decision do you need to make to bring it to scale? So are there some examples that you can provide in the best way to assess a certain type of technology and basically have that go or no-go point that's determinable and that can be articulated well to either elected officials or general public of why you're going in one direction versus pivoting? Is there an example that you can provide?
Why to pilot and knowing how to pilot. I think when a new idea comes into a city and there's no clear evidence on what the impact of that solution will be, that's when you want to pilot. If there is clear evidence that a service or a new service, a new technology, a new innovative mobility solution, as we're calling them here, is going to provide benefits, then you can scale immediately. And that's not usually the case because these are new and there's not a whole lot of evidence there. So piloting is to create that experience, to build that experience. At the time at which you have enough information to know if you're going to go forward, so setting clear thresholds for the next stage, is what you want to build into those plans. If you don't have those thresholds identified and the kinds of categories that you want those thresholds to apply to, then you're probably going to have a hard time understanding both the value of the pilot and also when to move up or when to move back or when to change the direction of the pilot. And so that's based on what we see a lot of cities doing. Gothenburg in Sweden, another city, Stockholm in Sweden, Bologna in Italy, all have had these piloting experiences where they've really identified specific thresholds that relate to not just the activity that is being delivered, but the impact of the activity on the city and other services. Is this improving the use of public transport? Is this improving the access to public space? And if not, then that's when the pilot stops or it gets redirected. Great. So clarity on the thresholds.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm going to answer a different one, which is, you know, pilots are another thing that we really love to do, and we think this is going to be great. We're going to be able to, you know, really try out this technology before we go full bore into it. The problem is, too often, we undertake pilots without really any notion of what comes next. How are you going to scale this? And the reality is, a number of innovators and technologists are not going to come for your pilot because there is no path to scaling that you've defined. So they're not going to, there is an investment up front that technology innovators have to make in order to bring some of these solutions to you. And if it's only a bite-sized little thing that's only going to cover a little small area, and even if they prove themselves worthy, you know, there's no real plan as to how this might actually go to deployment, which is what they want, is deployment. And so I would say, you know, one thing is, in terms of pilots, again, if you really want the best of the best, if you want a fair evaluation of what's being brought to you, one, know the off-ramp, how you're going to get off if it doesn't work, but similarly, know what is your path to deployment and convey that to others. I think as far as evaluation goes, it's not unique to pilots, but it's general. Make sure that what you're, ideally you want to evaluate outcomes, not outputs. That's not always possible with a pilot because it's a limited duration, it's a limited scale. You might not be able to get to the true outcomes that you want, but be very, very choosy about the measures that might be outputs. I've got a great friend, Eulois Cleckley, who was previously serving as the director of Miami-Dade DPW, and in looking at the performance metrics, sorry, Eulois should just call you out on this, but you know, Miami-Dade has a host of performance metrics, and Eulois was saying, like, when we're measuring the quality of a street, Don't use how many potholes you've filled as the measure of a quality of a street. If you are filling 0 potholes, it might be because the street's pristine and it looks great. If you're filling 250 in a very swift way, that's great for you, but that means that the road is in a terrible condition. So let's not use pothole filling as a measure of street quality, right? So know what those measures are so that they really do have a directional connection to the outcomes that you want from those pilots.
Very good. Well said. So we have a couple more questions from the crowd. So first is, as the public sector often feel like we are reactive to emerging technology developers, what can we do to get ahead of the game more and more to be proactive? So basically everybody coming and trying to sell some fancy new idea. So how can a public agency or department kind of get ahead of that and really be more proactive in those discussions?
Yeah, I'll start with this one because I sort of rushed through the example. But the example of the World Cup cities is one where the 11 cities and regions and transit agencies that are hosting the World Cup are being inundated with sales teams that can solve everything that there is and make toast too, right? Leading up to these games. And they don't have the capacity to observe. Some of them are probably very good solutions, but a host of them are just the sales teams wanting to get ahead of that. So what these 11 U.S. World Cup cities are doing is that they've come together and have crafted 4 priority challenge statements that they're putting out. And this is through ITS America, who's convening this group. And so they're saying, these are the challenges that really matter to us. Multilingual communication to this international event. How are we going to get information out to people in real time in languages that they understand, right? How are we going to handle multiple systems for payment, trip planning, and all of that? That's another challenge. What are we going to do about curbside management and really making TNCs and ride hails behave in the way that we want so that we don't have congestion at the curb? I'm forgetting the 4th one, but ADA accessibility, making sure that people with different abilities or with strollers or whatever it is actually know, because we're going to have all kinds of temporary pedestrian paths set up to get people to and from the events. How are we going to convey that out to people? These are the problems that we really want to focus on, and they're doing a reverse pitch. They're pitching industry, being very clear about what those problem statements are that they want, and saying they're not dictating the solution, and I think that's important too. We don't know what the solution is, but here's the problems that we want addressed. We're going to use the collective buying power of 11 US regions to try and catalyze the best thinking. This could be a big ticket, contract if you come to the solution that really meets these articulated challenges. But they're pitching to industry rather than waiting for industry to come and pitch them, and they'll have to sort through all of these, multiple solutions with capacity they don't have.
I'm just going to say 100%. When we look at the cities that have best navigated now the second phase of the range of new innovative mobility solutions are being offered, it's the cities that assert their right, but also their ability to set conditions, and set conditions in a purposive way, to say these are the core values that we have, these are the core challenges that we have. Amsterdam has not allowed e-scooter use in the city. It doesn't conform to what they want, because they want a city that functions for how most people get around, and most people are getting around walking, using public transport, or cycling, and adding e-scooter kicks, what we call in Europe, doesn't really fit that. Paris kicked out commercially shared e-scooters because they felt that wasn't delivering value for the citizens in the city. But at the same time, they expanded infrastructure for individually owned e-scooters and bicycles and light urban vehicles. So, the value there was, we want people to have this mobility, but we don't like the way in which it's been delivered in this model or in this service model.
Yeah, I think we all know scooters have been a rambunctious group, and I think certain cities have tried to manage them the best way that they can. We're almost out of time, but I do have one question. I'll be remiss not to ask this because I think we have 2 folks that can provide their perspective on this. So we do have a new administration. Karina used to work in the previous one. I'm sure everybody here is questioning what do you believe that we should expect around new transportation innovation and the support from our federal partners moving forward.
I'm not going to speak to that because I don't live in the U.S. And I'm not saying it's not my problem, but maybe Karina.
You just said this is not my problem.
But I feel for you. But I do want to say something before you close. So please, yeah. No, go ahead. No.
Well, innovation is one of those things that is really nonpartisan. We pride ourselves as Americans of bringing the innovation, of really trying to onshore new technologies and evolve these kinds of things. So I think that what we'll see in this new administration is a lot of support for continued. This is, we've heard about public-private partnerships and more efficiency and AI and all of that. That is where the innovation economy is going. It was going there before these announcements were there. I think that we'll continue to see investment and encouragement for those solutions to come forward. It is going to be very, very important for all of you in this room, though, going back to the whole theme of this panel, is to know what are the outcomes that you want from that innovation. So I think that this administration will invest in continued mobility innovation, but will it be the right kind of mobility innovation that will achieve all of these other goals that all of the other fantastic panelists have talked about to build the kinds of communities that are really livable, enjoyable, inclusive? I think that those are the questions, is that you're going to have to sort through that innovation as to how you manage it when it lands on your streets and in your communities.
What I can say, looking from the outside in, is that we have some fundamentally different models evolving in the world around how do we regulate, how do we act in these spaces, digital spaces. The European Union has a comprehensive series of acts that address data, that address data privacy, that address AI, and all of these are linked. The AI Act, the Data Act, the Digital Markets Act, all of these set a framework from the very top all the way down that enable at least European citizens to own their personal data, to say, this is how I would like my data to be used by Uber in communicating with Lime, or how I want my public transportation data to be communicated to my health authority. This is a freedom, a right that's inscribed in law, and that is not what we have in North America, and there is going to be a clash of worldviews on how do we regulate these spaces. But I'd like to finish by saying one thing that we don't really consider a problem now, but it is the next great tsunami, and that is when we talk about digitalization, we assume, of course, there is a digital divide, and that divide is linked to proficiency in using digital technologies. It's linked to the ability to access digital services for the banked, for the unbanked. But we say, well, that's an issue that will go away as we have this series of digital natives ourselves, hopefully, grow up, and then we won't have this as much of a digital divide. But the bad news is that even for digital natives, even for us that are highly proficient in these technologies, when we hit 75, 80 years old, we no longer cognitively interact in the same way with a lot of these digital interfaces. So we're looking at another form of exclusion that isn't linked to how well we understand and use these technologies, but linked to how well we can actually use them as our brains change and we get older. And so while we've seen this exclusion from an over-reliance on cars in sprawled out America, we're also going to see a new form of exclusion linked to those people who can no longer interact in these spaces because we've aged more than we can use.
Very good, very good. And I think you had a great quote to close us out. If you want to repeat it, I think all things that are easy aren't good.
So not all things that are easy are good.
Right.
Not all things that are good are easy.
All right, I think that's a great way to close out the panel. All right, so thanks everybody for staying through the final panel, and then don't forget to fill out the evaluation on Slido, and I'll turn it back over to Daniel.
One more round of applause. Thank you, guys.